that's how we really have stepped back and thought about, we want to reset this program to be able to say that whoever you are out there, you can look at this roster of ride centers or this catalog of ride centers, and based on the badges that we're going to ask you to show us and apply for, that would tell the rider what kind of ride experience you're going to have once you get there.
Welcome to Trail Effect. I am your host, Josh Blum. Trail Effect is a show that dives into the stories behind trails, the communities that embrace trails, and the people who rely on trails as a way of life. The goal of this show is to turn the stories you will hear from our guests into useful knowledge that can be applied to your community while providing some entertaining and inspirational content. Guests on Trail Effect include trail builders, board members, community leaders, volunteers, and regular people who really enjoy trails. For episode 203, we have Joe V. and Marty Caivano back on to discuss the recently launched IMBA Trail Towns Designation and the recently relaunched IMBA Ride Center Designation. We covered everything from the importance of these designations for your community, how to get awarded these designations, and even provided some example communities for these designations. If you are looking to level up the status of your community, look no further, as this conversation is for you. The Outdoor Marketing Bootcamp is where outdoor brands, organizations, and trail builders get real about marketing. On February 17th and 18th, 2026, join a 2-day virtual training with top outdoor marketing pros like Jed Gunn from Truck Bikes, Mark Ayler from Leave No Trace, and many others who know how to get your message heard. You'll learn story frameworks, audience strategies, and grant-winning tactics tailored to the outdoor world. If you want your marketing to work as hard as the projects you are building, this bootcamp is for you. You can check it out at www.outdoormarketingbootcamp.com or hit the link in the show notes. Now on to the Trail Effect with Marty and Joe. Here we are today on Trail Effect. I have IMBA back on with Joe Vadamancourt and Marty Caivano. Joe is the VP of IMBA Trail Solutions, and Marty is in charge of community engagement and business development. So how's it going, you two?
Awesome. It's a Tuesday here. No, it's a Wednesday, isn't it? See, I'm already a day behind because it's such a great day. It's a Wednesday here in Boulder, Colorado. Sun's out. It's going to be like 68 degrees. At some point today, I hope to get out on my bike. We'll see, though. So, awesome.
How about you, Marty?
Yeah, I'm just down the road in Denver, so same blue sky, same desire to get out and ride. In November, I got to take it.
Yeah, even in Wisconsin, it's been unseasonably warm, we'll say, or maybe it is becoming more seasonably warm, but it's been, mid 50s all week and dry, but I think that's all changing by the weekend. So we're going to take advantage of that before things go south.
In Wisconsin, you end up like it's winter. Like we'll get a little tiny spat of winter a few days, but then it goes right back to something that isn't really winter anymore.
And hopefully we actually get a full winter. I know I'm looking forward to getting on some skis quite a bit this winter. And I know you ski, Joe, and maybe you do too, Marty. I'm not sure.
I used to knuckle drag a little bit, and now it's just bikes.
I wouldn't be disappointed with just bikes.
Yeah. Really, like that winter thing I was just mentioning, it's really tough when Marty and I talk about in Colorado. You got to drive by a bunch of dirt to go ski. And it's kind of like, oh, I don't know. There's dirt right there I could ride. So it's sometimes a little daunting to say I'm going to go skiing because you drive by a bunch of dirt somewhere. So,
yeah. Well, today we're going to talk about a new program and a relaunch program. And that would be Trail Town and IMBA Ride Centers. Let's go into Trail Towns first, because this is the newest program, and this is something that I've personally thought should be a thing for a long time, and I'm really glad to see IMBA has taken this on. And I know that maybe not all the fine details are completely worked out, but this is a new program, and it really is going to start. I would look at it as maybe a stepping stone to becoming a ride center. Is that correct?
It could be. It's not necessarily designed as a feeder to a ride center, but it certainly could be. I think if we step back from the two, in really rough kind of terms, Ride Center is a destination place to go riding. It always has been. We're relaunching it under acknowledging some more modernized criteria, but it's really a place to travel to and ride your bike. Trail Town is more centered around where you would live, work, and play, and enjoy being part of that community. And maybe it's also a destination to go and ride to, but it doesn't have to be. It could just be, it supports the local community to be a better place, if you will, to live, work, and play. So it could, but I wouldn't tell people off the top that start as a trail town and you evolve into a ride center, because maybe you don't want to. Maybe tourism and bringing people to your community isn't what's driving that community. So
it's really a quality of life initiative.
Thank you. I'm writing that one down because that's an awesome way to talk about it. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I don't mean to dominate this conversation. Marty's super involved as well. But I think that's, in a nutshell, that's how we stand back and look at it.
Let's pull back the curtain and talk about, and maybe Marty, you can start out with this one. Let's pull back the curtain and talk about how Trail Town became a thing within the IMBA organization and why you felt it to be an important initiative to move forward with.
I think a lot of it, goes back to people in some ways did aspire to the Ride Center, but at the same time, they knew they were, either some distance away or they just didn't want to get to that level. They're like, tourism isn't necessarily our goal, but we'd still like to be recognized for what we do have, or we would like to have a designation to strive for that would give us some levers to pull within our community, like an advocacy tool to see more trails built in our community. And so IMBA went through a few iterations of this, trying to figure out what exactly it would be. For a while, internally, it was called, I think, the Ride Center Community. This was before my time of people trying to create this. And so it really, as you said earlier, kind of an obvious thing to create and offer to the trail community.
Since you took this on, how long did it take to actually go from just to kind of give people a sense of what happens behind the scenes? How long did it take from the conversation of starting the Trail Town to it going public?
Under the term Trail Town, we could clearly say, here's the start date, and here's the end date. I think what Marty just said, which is really interesting, is this conversation started, frankly, years and years ago. Marty's been here longer than I have, and she notes that it probably started before she was part of IMBA. I think one of the ways to think about it is Trail Town, frankly, is what IMBA does. We help people with community engagement. We help them with leveling up an organization to either promote their trails or gain access or steward their trails. We help them with funding services. We can help them with planning and design and the execution of getting trails on the ground. It's frankly a reflection of what IMBA does kind of across its whole umbrella there. And what it does in the end is level up or bring up a community to be able to be successful on all those different fronts of creating that quality of life that includes natural surface infrastructure in your community. So you can almost go back and say, when did this conversation start? Well, when IMBA was formed, because this is frankly what IMBA does and has done from its inception is work with communities to help them come up to the level that they can be successful on all those different aspects of getting natural surface infrastructure on the ground. That's a pretty vague answer, isn't it? Of like, yeah, this is just stuff we do.
No, it's good. We're going to get into the details. So in becoming a trail town, there's a handful of metrics or like kind of check boxes you want to check, which would be trail infrastructure. That's the obvious one, right? Got to have trails to be a trail town. Trail funding, a local organization, community engagement, and trail stewardship. And again, that falls under that umbrella of what IMBA does. Going back to trail infrastructure, you put a metric on it of needing to have 25 miles of trail within a 30-mile radius of the center of town, which is whatever I guess you determine as the center. It could be the community square or whatever makes sense to be a center. I don't think that's, hard and fast, but a dot needs to be put on a map, right?
Right.
So let's talk about how you got to that metric. Again, I think it might be pretty obvious, but it might be good for people to listen to understand why 25 miles. And I think, Marty, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, I mean, the goal obviously was to have enough there that people could do their after work ride or have a weekend ride and not kind of incessantly be repeating the same trail system. So there needed to be enough there to provide at least variety for the people living there and variety of experiences. You could get your kids out on a certain trail. You could have a really challenging trail to work your way up to, some amount of progression. And so 25 miles felt to us like a pretty solid amount that you could say, hey, this is a trail town. There's enough for me to go ride and experience in all the different ways that I'm seeking. But we also didn't want to make that number so high that it's either borderline becoming a trail destination or just maybe not feasible in given communities. So we tried to find a number that kind of struck a balance.
I think the 30 miles piece is the other aspect. There might be more trail than that, but in a community, Denver, for example, has way more than 30 miles of trail around it. But within that, 25 miles. But within that 30-mile radius, that's what you can do after work. And so it really kind of focuses on, what can you do on a daily level that isn't a big destination and requires that, okay, this is an all-day endeavor to go ride some trail. It's really the combination of how much and how accessible is it to your garage, to your driveway.
Part of this designation goes back to something Marty and I talked about in a previous conversation we had earlier this year, which is that community assessment. So that's where this community assessment tool is really going to be a key component, correct, Marty?
Yeah, I mean, that will form the basis for whether or not you are eligible to apply for the Trail Town designation. So you'll have to hit a certain score to be eligible. And then if you don't have to pursue it, you can just take the assessment to see how you rank, maybe see where your strengths and weaknesses are. But if you do want to apply, you obviously have to use the assessment as your road into the designation. And then after that, we can get into this in more detail. You have to provide some level of documentation to show us what you have and that you really do meet the criteria laid out in the assessment.
Yes. And speaking of assessment and timeline, we'll transition to timeline here. The application window is November 15th. We're going to say 2025 because that's when we're recording this, to January 15th of 2026. And then you're going to announce these Trail Town designations by April 1st of 2026. There is a small barrier of entry to get into this, which is, I'm going to say very small, which is an application fee. And that's pretty much it. And then in 3 years, a renewal fee. So do you want to maybe talk about that window and maybe imply that people shouldn't fill out the community assessment on January 14th?
To make sure I understand your question, they shouldn't necessarily wait till the last minute. Is that what you're getting at?
Correct. Yeah. Kind of provide a little bit of context in terms of timeline for actually within that window of what a trail community or trail town should look for in terms of, okay, we want this designation. We should probably start working on it sooner than later.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to take you a little while to really define what's in your 30-minute drive radius. If you're really familiar with your trails, you're going to know. But if someone, let's say from a tourism org, again, not always totally likely, but if a business owner or a land manager or somebody else wants to apply, it may take them a while to figure out exactly what's in the drive radius. And then to really think through the questions and, form your answers with a group of people. I think that's also what we're seeing is sometimes we've seen responses from different people in given communities that come up with a slightly different answer. So I think the goal of the tool is really to bring people together to discuss it as a group of stakeholders and decide what the actual answers are. And the hidden benefit of that is that you get to discuss all this with all the people in your community. And within that, you will start to find strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and things you want to do just by answering those questions. And then you have a concrete answer that you pass on to us for evaluation.
I'm going to name drop a community that I know is very excited about this. And that community is Rapid City, South Dakota. They have we're going to say a newly reformed trail organization called the Black Hills Bike Hub, or BH squared, if you don't want to say BH. And one of their club president, who's got a great name, Mr. Doc Savage, he and I were talking when this came out, or when this press release came out. And I know he was super excited about, this designation for his community. That's an example of a organization that is highly engaged within their community and probably is deserving of this type of designation. What other communities like Rapid City do you think will be excited about this?
Well, we do have a few organizations that kind of helped us with the beta testing process way back when we started creating the assessment. Some of those may come forward and want to pursue the designation. Weatherford, Texas being one. We have a long-term advocate down there who I hope will continue to pursue this. And I think any towns that have been, pursuing trail development for some time and feel like they have this balance of things that we're looking for in the assessment, we hope they'll pursue it. And the ones that are maybe got some gaps, we hope they'll use it to further their own development.
Yeah. And I know this, you brought up tourism departments, and I see this one landing squarely in the convention not the Convention Visitors Bureau, but the Chamber of Commerce, we'll say, the business aspect. And I think, for the communities out there looking at this, like really engaging with the business community, I think would be super important for this particular designation. Would you agree?
No question, because you think about what does this do for a community? Well, it makes it a great place to live, work, and play, right? Well, work is a piece there, and that's the business community. But the other aspects, live, and play, also work with whether it's a local business community or the local government. Either one, they're going to be aligned on this. That yes, we'd love people to want to live here, want to work here, want to raise their families here. So I think, no question, you don't just like sit in a room with your trail club and fill this out. You want to bring the whole community into this. So,
yeah, and this totally falls in line with, and I know you all probably hear this pretty regularly, which is how do we attract and retain more talent? So many communities are looking at that these days, and to have this type of designation that you could, take to a potential person that, say it's a doctor that the local hospital is trying to, hire on to staff, having this designation, if that doctor or that doctor's family is into trails, I think could be huge.
Yeah. There's no question about that. I mean, that's exactly what this is about, is rounding out a community's infrastructure to make that place a great place to live. And, so many communities, I mean, if you're in Denver, a place like that, it's not so hard to attract people. There's a lot of jobs, a lot of things going on. But if you're in a, Rapid City, South Dakota, well, it might be a challenge to bring in that professional business infrastructure like that, and to keep enough staffing in a lot of businesses and things like outdoor recreation and what your family can enjoy on the weekend. That has a lot to do with it. I mean, you can earn a salary in a lot of places, but do you really want to live there? Well, that's these kind of aspects. So,
Kettle Mountain Apparel has fall and winter gear dialed. Cold is creeping in, and if you plan to keep getting outside, you'll need layers that actually pull their weight. Kettle delivers with solid base layers, dependable outerwear, and no-nonsense designs that handle real weather. Hit the link in the show notes or on the Trail Effect website when you place your next Kettle Mountain order, and you'll be supporting the show at the same time. Venture far and laugh hard. Well, let's transition over to the tourism side, and that is the Ride Center. The Ride Center designation for, I'm gonna date all of us here. It's something that, came about, we're going to say, in the mid to late 2000s. And those of us that were heavily involved with trail organizations, we're going to say 2009-ish, 8 or 9-ish to roughly maybe 2017 or 18. We understand what the IMBA Ride Center is, and a lot of the communities that we may have visited or even live in became IMBA Ride Centers of one level of designation or another. But then there was a gap. And I only know this because of people that I communicate with that are significantly younger than me. We're going to say in their 20s. And they don't know what a ride center is because they kind of got maybe into mountain biking during that gap. Let's talk about, and we'll go with Marty, you first, the reintroduction of the IMBA Ride Centers and maybe some of the conversations that were happening behind the scenes to get it to where we're at now today with the new relaunch of this.
Yeah, I mean, it was before my time when the Ride Center program kind of lapsed. I have to presume COVID played a factor in that because we couldn't go do the assessments to assess anybody to receive the designation. So, and then, the interest in trails, the boom that occurred after COVID got IMBA really busy with trail development in general. And I believe the organization probably struggled to find the time to get the program relaunched. And then there were just sort of, endless circular discussions about exactly, what should this program become? How do we evolve it? How do we operationalize it in the modern day? Given the cost of everything, and how does it fit in our current mission? IMBA's, mission has largely remained the same, but the focus has changed a little bit. It used to be all trails were kind of backcountry, and you weren't trying to necessarily build trails close to home. And IMBA's mission evolved to become more interested and more focused on trails closer to people. And as part of that, we were trying to understand how the Ride Center designation fit. So it took us some time, right? We kept trying to carve out the time to figure out what to do with it and how to do it.
With that, formerly there was 3 designations, and we're going to say that was bronze, silver, and gold. Now there's 2 designations, which is, and I maybe have this wrong, but this is based on some research that I did. There is the IMBA Ride Center, and then there's the Premier Ride Center. And we're going to say at a base level, you put a metric of 60 miles minimum for that Ride Center designation. Let's talk about the consolidation of going from just having a ride center to having a Premier Ride Center and how that kind of fits with the old model of, like, say you're silver, right? Do you become a ride center or do you strive for the Premier Ride Center?
I mean, if we go back, Josh, you and I and Marty, we've all been around for a long time in the mountain bike world. It wasn't 10 years ago, 15 years ago, a trail was a trail, right? It was just about quantity of trail. I want to go somewhere where I can ride 20 miles on this day and 20 miles on that day and not be on the same trail. That was reflective of the whole mountain bike world at the time. Bikes were kind of, you had a hardtail or a short travel bike, and that was pretty much it. And it didn't matter so much what the trail was. And there wasn't this broad range of riders that there are now. I mean, we all know so many people. I mean, we had this conversation earlier. Marty's a pedaler and I like to be in the air. So, like, people are different in how they think about their riding now. And that wasn't necessarily the case back when this program kind of debuted. And so that measure was, okay, can I go there for 2 days and ride a whole bunch, or can I go there for 5 days and ride a whole bunch? And so that was what really stratified the different levels of ride center, was how much trail do you have? A couple of places you and I know really well just advertise, we've got 100 miles of trail. And I don't think that's, I know that's not how every rider thinks about where they want to ride today. And frankly, we almost needed that gap in there of not doing this for us to be able to stand back and acknowledge that that's not how riders think about where they want to go ride anymore. You're looking for a certain experience. You're looking for gravity trails. You're looking for a bike park. You're looking for a backcountry experience. You might be looking for more than one of those, but you're looking for something within that portfolio like that. And that's how we really have stepped back and thought about, we want to reset this program to be able to say that whoever you are out there, you can look at this roster of ride centers, or this catalog of ride centers, and based on the badges that we're going to ask you to show us and apply for, that would tell the rider what kind of ride experience you're going to have once you get there. And so there are 2 levels of ride center, because we did need to stratify how much trail there is. There's a 60-mile ride center and then a 100-mile Premier Ride Center. But in order to get to Premier, you also have to be able to earn all 4 of the badges. And the badges are front country riding. We think of that as sort of like the loop type systems that you see close to towns. Backcountry, which is not a loop system, could be one great big loop, but it's backcountry. You're going to get a long ways from your car. Bike park, which is pump tracks, slope style lines, jump lines, that sort of thing. And then gravity experience, which maybe you pedal, but maybe you shuttle, maybe you take a lift. But those are real distinct rider types. And so to be a premier ride center, you have to be able to earn all 4 of those badges, plus have 100 miles of riding trail. And we add all that up. Different than our own Trail Town designation, we're also going to take a look at the quality of that, because we don't want to just stamp anybody who's got those 4 badges as a premier ride center. We're going to go out and we're going to take a look at those trails and confirm the quality experience that somebody can have. So you'll be able to look at this ride center designation and really say, yeah, I can go there for 3 days and hit these 3 types of riding and really dig the place. So it's a measure of the type of riding and the quality experience that you're going to have when you're there.
You already transitioned into the badges, which I was going to bring up, but I want to talk about. So the 2 of the badges are super straightforward, front country and back country. I think we can all wrap our head around what that is. The gravity in the bike park, and I think this is something that gets a little nuanced even within the way we all talk within the trail world, which is a bike park can be a gravity experience. But it might also be, I'm guessing, pump track, like you said, skills lines, slopestyle lines, and maybe more in a urban setting rather than in we'll say a resort setting where you would maybe find more gravity stuff. Do you want to maybe provide some like real life examples that we have today of like the difference between what you consider gravity and bike park, so we don't blur the 2 together? Because I think a lot of times they can get blurred together.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, I don't need to. Marty, go for it. I talked the last one.
Well, you may want to speak more to this, Joe, but like the bike park, we pictured it more as a municipal bike park, right? Someplace where kids can go, anybody can go and work on skills and develop themselves as a rider before, heading out into other experiences. We didn't intend that to be a ski area bike park. That would more fall under gravity. So I hope that's at least reasonably clear. And then, gravity-focused trail systems are developing all over the country. We're working on the Bean Peak system in Prescott, Arizona, which is a kind of a specific gravity experience. There's older ones, too. They were kind of cutting edge, Sandy Ridge, right outside of Portland. You guys can probably think of some other examples where gravity was kind of the focus of the trail system itself. And this is a way to provide people with that fun and gravity flow experience, whether it's accessed, in the case of Sandy Ridge, by pedaling, but ideally we're kind of looking for ways for people to run multiple laps. So whether that's by lift or by car, I guess even by e-bike, a way to provide that gravity experience. So the trick there is to keep the trail from top to bottom, to not really require pedaling, maybe just here and there if you're a newer rider, not any significant climbing or pedaling in the middle, and to provide that flowing experience.
Josh, one of the things that Marty just mentioned, I want to make sure, that's one of our distinctions is, can a good rider ride this and on the downhill parts, not be pedaling. That's kind of one of the definitions of gravity. And if, you think of Benson Grade in Marquette, Michigan, you're pedaling up, but once you start the downhill, a good rider is not going to be pedaling. Spirit Mountain in Duluth. There's a number of them out there spread across the country that are developing inside a ride community or, kind of portfolio of riding within a community. Bean Peaks, Marquette, Prescott that Marty just mentioned as well. So
let's drill this into an example, Joe, that you know quite well. And this just came into my mind, even though we started out talking about it before we hit record. How does this fit into, we're going to say, Talmark Village, but we're also going to pair that with the greater IMBA Trail System? Because I'm going to go out on a limb and say that region pretty much checks all the boxes today.
Maybe. I'm not sure about the bike park aspect, but because I haven't been there in a while and experienced that part of it. But absolutely. So the way we would measure a ride center is, we ask the applicant, give us the dot, put a dot somewhere on the map, and it's a 30-minute radius around that. we'll take a look at and evaluate everything in that radius. So you could drop a pin in Cable, Wisconsin, and it would cover all the way down to the southern end of the campus system, as well as out to the east, I guess. It would cover the Rock Lake piece of that system. It would now cover the new Telemark development there, which is a total gravity experience. It's, 2 climbing trails and a whole bunch of gravity trails. And then the campus system they still talk about it as 100 miles of single track. That's a real backcountry experience. You can find yourself 20 miles away from your car. They would for sure be able to qualify for the ride center status. And then we'd have to take a look at that, all the badge aspects to make sure they could qualify for the Premier Center. So, but yeah, absolutely. It's places like that. I mean, there's not a lot of community there. I mean, I think Cable's less than 1,000 people and Hayward's only 3,000 people. So it's a pretty small community, and tourism and destination riding is a big deal for them. So we would look at that community and say, well, you guys should apply for the ride center status, because that we think that you could achieve it at some level. And we also think that's the one that would make sense for your community.
Marty, within the ride center, we're going to say criteria. In the old criteria, you guys also evaluated whether or not there is a microbrewery, what the grocery shopping was like, what the hotels were like. Like it was a real holistic approach, we'll say. Is all that criteria still baked into this new relaunch?
To a basic degree, that stuff is still in there. It's no fun to visit a destination and not be able to go get a decent coffee or find a brew pub or a place to buy some organic food for dinner if that's what you're into. So we'll definitely be, looking to see that those things are there. We will probably not do the, in-depth sampling of all these things that we used to do, because it does make the review very time consuming and then as a result expensive. So we still want to see that destinations are following these kind of like tourism best practices, and just that there's things there for people to enjoy when they visit to ride. You don't want people to come ride and then spend their money somewhere else. That's not the point of what a community is looking for out of tourism visitation. So those things are there, but we may not, hop into every hotel and restaurant and brew pub along the way.
Yeah. And I mean, again, it's all that stuff is super important. And as a person who has gotten into really watching what they eat, the organic side of things, I'm really glad you said that, because I think it is important for a lot of people these days, and where they go. Like when we were all together, we'll say in Madison at the trail conference last spring, the amount of food choices in that town relative to where we were at Monona Terrace is incredible, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. That's an incredible restaurant town in general. Yeah. So.
Yes. So moving forward, if you are an IMBA Ride Center today, we'll say prior to this relaunch, what will it look like to continue to be a ride center if you so choose to continue to be a ride center? I personally think every community that is currently a ride center will reapply, because almost all the people that I've talked to that have a ride center really enjoy that they have a ride center, and we're most certainly striving to become that next level of ride center. So we'll say we're going to pull out Anniston, Alabama, a place, I don't know if either of you have been there, but it's a place that is a bronze level ride center today. I know they've been striving to become a silver prior to this redesignation. What would it look like for them to, one, become a ride center at the base level, or a premier? We know what the premier is, but how will they reapply?
I was going to let Marty take it because she nodded her head yes, so she's been there. I've not been there, so I can't speak specifically to Anniston's trails or the community. Basically, we're taking a stepped approach to the existing ride centers. First of all, they've all been informed that the program is evolving, and in an outline form, this is what it's evolving to. We've told them all that they're grandfathered in at this point to the program as a standard ride center, as a ride center. And then we've invited them within a year to apply to the new program. And then we take it through the same evaluation as if it was a brand new community to give them the status that they deserve based on what's on the ground today. That is not entirely new because Ride Center wasn't a in perpetuity certification in the past. You still had to, show evolution and show maintenance and on those existing trails. And so the evaluation of it is coming now, and it might actually be coming, if you reapply, coming at a later date than it would have, because if you're a Ride Center from 10 years ago, it probably would have happened by now. But I think most of them, as you pointed out, are going to be interested at some level in reapplying once they understand the full program. They're going to be grandfathered in this year. They're still going to be represented as a Ride Center within our program for the next year. And we're inviting them during the course of the next year to tell us how they'd like to proceed with an application. And then we get them on the calendar to go and do some evaluation on site. But we're pretty excited about seeing them evolve also. Most of them have made a lot of changes, like you noted, Canva. I can't speak to Aniston, so I'm jumping back to Canva. They've made a lot of changes because now that community has some loop systems they didn't have 15 years ago. And then they also have now gravity park or, gravity riding with telemark. So most of these communities, that they were given this status of bronze, silver, gold way back when, but they've probably evolved, and it's a pretty exciting moment for them to show how they've evolved as well. So
we could pull out another IMBA Ride Center that I believe is currently silver that that isn't Aniston, which would be Copper Harbor. And I don't know, I'm not sure when you were there last, but you have seen the evolution of that from being what it was as a kind of a town centered trail system to now being backcountry, a bike park, doesn't have this
and gravity.
Yeah. And gravity doesn't have I should say gravity bike park doesn't necessarily have the urban skills bike park, although now that I think about it, they do.
Yeah. I thought they did as well. So I was surprised because you've probably been there more recently than I, but.
Yeah, because they have the skills area that the club built out at the base of East Bluff, which was specific to their men's and women's camps and clinics. And they're continuing to evolve that in various locations around the community, we'll say.
Right. If you think about the previous Ride Center program, Copper Harbor would have been a silver, as you said, based on the amount of mileage that they had in trails. And it was, what they had at Brockway and what they had kind of going out to the point, and that pretty much was it. Well, now you've got those same things still exist. You have a bike park that was built at East Bluff. You have the whole East Bluff shuttle program system. You now also can shuttle Brockway. Maybe you couldn't 15 years ago. So now you look at that and think of how that community can talk about itself with this badge program and the mileage combined within the Ride Center designation. I think it actually tells, somebody that they're regularly seeing people from all over the country, but especially that whole upper Midwest area, Minneapolis down to Chicago or down to even to St. Louis. People are traveling to that spot to ride. Well, now you're able to tell them, got all these great amenities. And it's a small town, so, there's only however many brew pubs and coffee shops there are, but they do have them, right? So, and you can camp right in town, and all of the things that we all know make a great destination ride center. The program now highlights all of that stuff. So,
speaking of Copper Harbor, it's kind of crazy how much stuff they pack into the general store.
Camping gear, antifreeze, rice,
organic food.
Exactly. Right.
It's like this tiny little shop, but it's got stuff that you can't find in your own community probably, and it's there. It blows my mind.
Yeah, I broke some camping stakes. Okay, go to the little general store. I want some organic rice. Go to the general store.
Yeah. The only thing you could not get at the general store this year, which kind of I had to laugh at, was ice. Their ice machine was broke. But they told you where you could get ice where else in town. So they didn't have it, but other places did.
But that's the beauty of like a destination ride center is we all have these kinds of conversations about it. The great little cup of coffee they had, the awesome pizza that you had, the great gravity trail or the backcountry trail that you rode. And that's what Ride Center program is really about is highlighting those places that make those experiences for riders. We all three of us experience it, and we know so many people that do. That's what you want to know. Like, can I have a great, awesome experience? Not just the riding, but the other aspects as well. Am I really going to, and am I going to want to go back 2 years later because of it? So,
not to put you on the spot, Joe,
but I'm going to anyway.
But I'm going to in a good way. I think you'll enjoy this. You used to live squarely in the Midwest, and with your previous rollout track and then moving up to Cable Hayward area, you're now out in Boulder. And you're now in a different position. What are some of the places that you're excited for that may be new ride centers? They could be old ride centers, but reapplying. But what are your now places that you're excited about going to now that you're geographically located in a different part of the country than you were for a really long time?
Yeah, I think, that's the interesting part. And I don't need to speak only about my experience, but I can speak to my experience. When you're located in a part of the world, whatever that is, you kind of draw this circle. Like I'm going to take my family, which means I'm going to drive and all my bikes and my dog and all this stuff, and I'm going to go, which means you're going to drive. Well, your driving circle for most people is different than your flying circle, and so you draw this circle around where you live and say, what can I do within 7-8 hours drive? I don't want to stay overnight on the way there. I want to be able to leave in the morning and get there, set up my camp and ride the next day. So when I was in the Midwest, Bentonville was in there, but that was about the far edge of it. Copper Harbor was, on the northern edge of it. Lake Michigan kind of blocked you, so you didn't really go that way when I was in Wisconsin. And then there was the kind of Minnesota destinations, and that was your circle. And they're all awesome. I mean, there's plenty of great riding within that circle I just described. When you get to the front range of the Rockies, where Marty and I both live, you draw that similar circle. It's pretty amazing because, first of all, you don't have the eastern block of Lake Michigan that I had previously. So I do think about all the way out to Chattanooga, Tennessee. Bentonville still kind of in that circle. On the northern side, I'll probably stretch it and think of Whitefish, Montana, Jackson Hole to Driggs, Idaho area, with Targhee and Teton Pass. I think of that. Salt Lake, of course, and everything in that area that there is to ride. St. George down in, Cedar City down in southern Utah, Prescott, Arizona, Taos, New Mexico, Angel Fire, Lincoln National Forest. It's like you get this awesome circle around wherever you are. But then how do you pick from that? I just listed off the 15 places that I could go and ride. Well, that's what Ride Center can hopefully help somebody within that. It's like, okay, within that big circle I just described, how do I start measuring those? Well, you do your Google search and you do, YouTube videos of how is that trail. Something like, IMBA Ride Center kind of gives it a third party endorsement. And that's what this program's really about is, helping to kind of group those together. If out of those dozen or 15 that I just listed off, if 3 of those are ride centers, well, they kind of bubble up. So
you just brought up something, Joe, that I'm going to ask Marty, and it probably isn't part of the ride center designation, but I think has become more of how we choose to where we go. And I'm going to lead with IMBA does a really good job of visually telling stories about communities. Will that be a component of the ride center moving forward? And maybe IMBA will do the videography for it. Maybe it's videography that's already done. Telling that story of, say, I'm gonna throw out a totally unknown, which is San Antonio, Texas. I don't know if there's trails there. There's trails going in not far from there, probably not within a 30-mile radius, maybe, but are you going to have a visual representation of what somebody might be able to find in said place to kind of help tell that story so Joe knows, hey, I'm going to bring my backcountry or my downcountry XC bike, sort of something I'm going to pedal a bunch of miles on, or I'm going to bring my 170 travel enduro sled and get some park laps in. Right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there'll be images for sure. We'd like to help people look toward their own marketing and how to improve that and reshare that. We're hoping to have narratives and better descriptions of each ride center so people can really understand what they're getting into in each destination. And then we have a partnership with Trailforks, and Trailforks is the way to see all of the, user-generated content about a given location and see what your fellow riders think about it. Look at their photos, look at their videos. Some amount of storytelling may be able to happen through the Greater Outside network with Trailforks. We're still sort of exploring that partnership. But I'm hopeful there will be a lot more information, even within IMBA and its partners, than there ever used to be about the ride centers, much less everything else that's already out on the internet.
Is that a new partnership with Trailforks?
It is.
Is that breaking news, or is that something that has been happening for a little while now?
I guess it's somewhat breaking news.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Marty, but there is a page currently on Trailforks. If you go on the web version, you can find IMBA Ride Centers as a page designation, and they're all listed, and then of course link to whatever that Ride Centers page is within Trailforks. It's relatively new. You're not going to get there to Trailforks today and see the updated version of Ride Center. That's still coming. We're working with them on that now. But eventually, yeah, you're going to, go to a location and it'll show if it's an IMBA Ride Center and how many badges it has, that sort of thing. Again, just a way, it's kind of one of the things that we realized through the revamp of this program is a third-party endorsement could be us, but the communication of that, there's so many channels out there now. We just want to provide that third-party endorsement or third-party certification of it, and then utilize all the different communication channels there are out there. And that's hence the partnership with Trailforks. It's really the biggest tool out there that people use to find trail, especially if you're going to somewhere new, which Ride Center fits in with. Sort of a natural combination for us to be working with them and then with us on that. So.
Sounded a little vague about it. It's just because we've been talking to Trailforks for years just to help them keep their list of organizations up to date and all that kind of thing. So it's not like we woke up and saw that Trailforks was out there. Like, hey, we should go talk to them.
No, I think, if you're talking about like the Kleenex of online mapping apps, most people, I think, refer to Trailforks. In today's world, there's obviously other ones out there, but I think that, at least from what I've heard and what I personally use, Trailforks is like the place that most people gravitate to if they're looking for some kind of online mapping, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's good.
We might as well. Like, we all have our own ride groups, right? And people you ride with around the country. And if you start talking to them about, what do you use? Seems like the highest percentage come back to Trailforks. So,
yeah. Well, is there anything on ride centers or trail towns that we didn't cover yet that you want to get covered before we wrap this one up? Marty.
I just kind of wanted to make it clear that, the ride center is still held to a pretty high standard and that we're going to come look at your infrastructure and what you have on the ground there. Whereas with trail towns, there's no in-person assessment. We're going to analyze the things that you supply to us, do some desktop research, kind of make sure what you're telling us is what's there. And so that kind of explains the substantial difference between the two and how they're assessed by us. So, you know that IMBA has been on the ground at a ride center to see what's there, to ride the trails, to experience it as you would. That's kind of a substantial divider between the two programs.
Yeah, there's an application process for both. The application process with Ride Center is pretty detailed. You catalog all your trails, all the distances, Trailforks ratings of those trails, and then that gives us a desktop analysis, if you will, of your community's riding. There's a process of us kind of this meeting, an online meeting with that community to talk about their application. And then there's a go, no go moment of, okay, now we're going to put you in the calendar to send somebody there to take a look at that infrastructure along with you to assess that quality of everything you've provided. And then there's a final analysis of that comes back to you with here's the status you've achieved. But there's also a gap analysis there of, this gravity trail we think needs some work based on this, and this. So it kind of gives you a roadmap from wherever you do achieve as that community to the next level or the next status or the next quality standard, if you will. So it's pretty involved, in other words.
That's actually a very good point that you bring up, because a savvy trail community will use that analysis to get what they need to move forward. Whether they achieve the status or not, they have a valuable tool there, correct?
For sure. Yeah, because you're going to have a complete gap analysis there. We think these things work in the ways that you've talked and described. We think these things could use some effort in these ways. It's now a tool for access. It's a tool for fundraising. It's a tool for community engagement. There's a lot of ways that report in that gap analysis at whatever level you've achieved. Even if you've achieved premier status in all 4 badges, there still might be some gap analysis that you're going to get back, which gives you a roadmap going forward of, where are we going to need some additional access and work with land managers, where our club could be leveled up because the maintenance is not happening as well as it should on these trails, where, we could go out and raise some money because we want to realign this section and we need a professional builder to come in. But it gives you a roadmap on a lot of different things there.
Well, I think that about wraps everything up. I've not asked this question to you, Joe. Marty got this question back in January, and I'm trying to play catch up with people that I previously had on the show. And this will be probably fairly obvious to Joe as far as like how he answers, because I think people that have listened to this point know how he's going to answer. But Joe, what do you look for in a trail town or a ride community? And I'm going to say, answer this as selfishly as possible. And you could maybe even answer it in a way of like, say you had to move from Boulder, family aside, like, got to move from Boulder, but I can go wherever I want. What are the things I'm looking for?
If I was, able to fast forward to that point, first of all, that's a hard one for me to answer because my grandkids live 4 houses down and my other daughter right across the street. So they'd all have to leave before I'd be contemplating this. But I would actually go out and I'd take a look at these, frankly, because I'm a mountain biker at all the way down to my bones. I'd look at these 2 assessments, frankly. Is it a trail town? Where is it along the process of becoming a trail town? Because now I'm talking about working and living there. So I want to know, is it a trail town? Because I think that's going to be a measure that's going to really matter to me personally about where I want to live. And then I need all the kinds of riding. Like I rode 20 miles on a whole bunch of single track and one big loop yesterday. That's kind of a backcountry ride. This weekend, I'm going to take my e-bike up to Virginia Canyon and jump myself silly. And next weekend, I'm probably going to ride at Johnny Park, which is kind of our backcountry slab riding, techie downhill stuff. And so I'd probably be looking at Ride Center that achieved all 4 badges because I'm somewhere along the way on a given 7-day period. I'm probably going to want to ride each of those points. So, and then the old Ride Center of I drink bougie coffee and will only eat a certain kind of pizza. So that's also in there for me. And how skunky is the IPA? Well, that also is a measure for me. So I really think like Joe needs Trail Town status and show me how many badges on a Ride Center you have, because that's where I'm going to live. So
nice. That's actually, I wasn't even angling towards like answering with the Ride Center and Trail Town, but I think that's a perfect way to answer this one. And I do always want people to answer it selfishly. So I think that's, it's important. Some people want to say the popular answer, but I want it to not be popular. I want it to be truly what you want. Right.
Yeah. A great jump line and some bougie coffee kind of brings every place way up high on the list for me. So,
yep. And I always say it's got to have wood-fired pizza. You're not a trail community unless you have wood-fired pizza. And like Cable hits that one, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Burritos is the second type of food group that necessary. So
I would agree with that too, because I'm a vegetarian, and you can have really good vegetarian burritos and really good vegetarian pizza. So,
exactly. So
great. Well, I really appreciate you two taking the time today to bring everyone up to speed with what a trail town is, with what the new relaunch of the Ride Center program is. I think there's a lot of people that are going to be really happy, especially, trail towns just because it's a much lower barrier of entry to get kind of dip your toes in the water with getting a good trail specific type of designation. But I know, and I know you know, Marty, and you know too, Joe, that there's been a lot of people asking for that Ride Center to come back.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure there's a lot of people that were really happy to see this press release when it came out a week or two ago.
Yeah. The emails that Marty she's generally the point person on this. The emails she's getting of when's the application available and what happens to my old status and when do I go through the new process? And, like there's been a lot of noise about that. And we just keep saying, we're almost there. We're almost there. We're going to have the application up and live soon.
Yeah. And just to be clear, the application process for the Ride Center doesn't necessarily have an open and close window. It's kind of rolling year round.
Yeah. 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 You can apply it. The challenge will be the execution of the whole review process and getting on site. So, right now we have no backlog, but I imagine as soon as we open it up, we're going to have a backlog of that. So there'll be a apply anytime, start working with us anytime conversation. But we'll have to say, okay, well, we can't get there until this time. So
nice. Well, I appreciate you two taking some time out of your Wednesday morning to be able to hop online and for this conversation to happen. And
no worries. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. If you like what you've heard, please take the time to share these shows with others. Sharing these shows will help create awareness of both the guests who have taken the time to be on the show and the podcast series itself. Also, if you're new to the Trail Effect podcast, check out our ever-expanding library of episodes. If you listen to the Trail Effect podcast on Apple or Spotify, please don't forget to leave a rating and review, as this is one of the best ways to show our support for the Trail Effect podcast. For additional ways to help support the Trail Effect podcast, check out the affiliate links tab at the Trail Effect website, where you'll find links to Kettle Mountain apparel and Trail One components. By using the affiliate links found at www.traileffectpodcast.com, a small commission will come back to the podcast, which will help keep this thing going. This podcast has been edited and produced by Evolution Trail Services. Thank you again for listening.